It was just a minor fall, Mr. Park. These things happen. That's what the director of Sunridge Senior Living told me, smiling like she was doing me a favor. She said it while pointing at my mother's arm wrapped in gauze, bruised so dark it looked like spilled ink under her skin. My mom has Alzheimer's. She can't explain what happened. Half the time, she doesn't even know what day it is. So the director spoke for her. She's confused, she added softly. She probably bumped into the nightstand. I nodded. I thanked her. I shook her hand. Then I went home, sat alone in my truck, reached under the passenger seat, pulled out a tiny SD card, and slid it into my phone. Because the clock radio on my mother's nightstand wasn't just a clock radio, it was a camera. I hit play, and the fall didn't happen. What I saw wasn't an accident. It was a lie. And the worst part? Someone in management walked by the doorway and did nothing. That's when I stopped being polite. I'm a long-haul trucker, the kind of job that turns days into highways and makes every meal taste like a gas station. When my mom's Alzheimer's progressed, I tried to keep her at home. I tried schedules, home care, neighbors checking in, me calling twice a day from the road. But Alzheimer's doesn't negotiate. One night, I got a call from a neighbor. My mom had wandered outside in her slippers, looking for a grocery store that closed 10 years ago. I drove 12 hours straight, heart pounding the entire way, and found her sitting on the curb, shivering, confused, smiling like she hadn't scared the life out of everyone. That's when I accepted what I didn't want to accept. Love wasn't enough. She needed care I couldn't provide. Sunridge Senior Living looked perfect on paper. 5-star reviews, photos of bright hallways, and smiling nurses. A director who spoke in that warm, trained tone that makes you feel like you can finally exhale. Her name was Patricia Hammond. She sat across from me in a spotless office, hands folded like a counselor. "We treat our residents like family," she promised. "Your mother will be safe here." I asked every question. I read every policy. I toured the rooms. I wanted to believe her. And my mom actually seemed okay at first. She didn't remember my name some days, but she remembered my voice. She'd squeeze my hand when I visited and say, "You're good. You're my good boy." Then the signs started. Little things. A flinch when a staff member raised their voice. A sudden fear of bedtime. A change in her eyes, like she was always bracing for something. Patricia told me it was normal. Alzheimer's creates anxiety, she said. She's adjusting. I wanted to believe that too. Then I saw the bruises. Not once, not twice. A pattern. When I asked, I got a different story every time. She bumped her bed rail. She resisted bathing. She got agitated and slipped. I've hauled cargo through ice storms. I know what an accident looks like. This didn't look like one. And then my mom said something she hadn't said in months, clear as a bell, like fear pulled the words out of her brain. "Don't let them hurt me again." I went quiet. Patricia was standing right there, smiling politely, like she hadn't heard. I looked at my mom, looked at the director, and in that moment, I made the decision. If Sunridge was innocent, a camera would prove it. If they weren't, a camera would save my mother. I didn't install the camera like a movie hero. I did it like a desperate son who didn't know what else to do. I bought a clock radio camera online, the kind that looks normal unless you know where to look. I set it on the nightstand during visiting hours while a nurse was helping my mom in the bathroom. When I left, my hands were shaking. Not because I felt guilty, because I felt late. I drove back onto the highway the next morning. Miles blurred. Hours passed. My phone stayed face down on the seat like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I didn't want to see anything, but I needed to know. 2 nights later, at a rest stop in Nebraska, I finally opened the app. The live feed loaded. At first, it was nothing. My mom sleeping. The hallway light. Quiet. Then the door opened. A caregiver stepped in, Denise. I knew her face. She'd always smiled too wide when I visited. She didn't smile now. She moved fast, irritated, like my mother was a chore she hated. My mom stirred, confused, hands lifting as if to protect herself from something she couldn't understand. Denise's body language changed sharp, rough, impatient. My mom made a small sound, a frightened sound. And Denise, talk to her in a way you don't talk to any human being, let alone an 82-year-old woman who can't defend herself. I felt something snap inside me. I grabbed my keys, ready to drive back that second. Then I stopped. Because anger makes you reckless, and reckless is exactly how places like Sunridge survive. They count on families reacting emotionally, making accusations with no proof, then getting buried by paperwork and polite denials. So, I sat there in my truck with my jaw clenched so tight it hurt, and I recorded everything. I didn't sleep that night. I watched. I saved clips. I started a folder. And in the morning, I made a plan. Not to confront. To trap. People think justice is one dramatic moment. It isn't. Justice is documentation. It's timestamps, patterns, names, reports. It's forcing the truth into a shape that can't be ignored. I called a lawyer first, not the police, because I needed to do this the right way. I told him what I had. He asked one question. Do you have enough to show this isn't a one-time incident? Not yet, I admitted. Then don't tip them off, he said. Let them expose themselves. So I did. For the next month, I became two people at once. The polite son on the phone, thanking staff for updates, and the furious son in the truck, watching the footage, collecting proof, writing down every name. It wasn't just Denise. It was two other staff members who treated residents like burdens. It was shortcuts, rough handling, neglect. And the most damning part? Patricia Hammond, the director, walked past my mom's room during one incident, glanced in, and kept walking. She saw. She knew. By the third week, I had a timeline. By the fourth week, I had more than enough. My lawyer filed formal complaints with the state health department. Real complaints, backed by evidence. He contacted an investigative journalist who'd covered neglect cases before, and we scheduled one final meeting with Patricia. Not to argue, to see what she'd do when cornered. I walked into Sunridge with my phone in my pocket, my lawyer beside me, and calm so cold, it scared even me. Patricia greeted us with her professional smile. Mr. Park, she said warmly. How can I help you? I'm taking my mother out today, I said. Her smile twitched. Of course, she said quickly. Is something wrong? I looked her in the eyes. I know what happened. Patricia's face softened into that practiced sympathy again. I'm so sorry if you're upset, she said. But you have to understand, Alzheimer's can cause bruising. Falls happen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply pulled out my phone, placed it on her desk, and turned the screen toward her. A paused video, a timestamp, a still frame of my mother's room. Patricia stared at it like it was a bomb. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she did exactly what guilty people do when the truth is undeniable. She tried to change the rules. You can't record inside a facility, she said sharply. That's illegal. My lawyer spoke for the first time. It isn't, he said. And even if it were, it wouldn't erase what's on that video. Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her keyboard. Let me call our legal team, she said. My lawyer nodded. Please do. So she did. And while she was on the phone, we did what she didn't expect. We walked down the hall to my mother's room and packed her things. A nurse tried to stop us. My lawyer showed paperwork. No shouting, no scene, just removal. As we wheeled my mom out, she looked up at me with cloudy eyes and whispered, Home? Yeah, Ma, I said, throat tight. we're going home." In the lobby, Patricia intercepted us one last time. Her voice dropped, cold now. "If you release this footage, you'll destroy people's lives," she said. I stared at her. "You destroyed my mother's peace," I replied. "You had a month to fix it. You did nothing." Then the front doors opened, and a small news crew walked in, camera on shoulder, notepad in hand. Patricia's face went white, because she knew polite denial doesn't work on video. The investigation moved fast after that. Not because the system is always fair, because the evidence was undeniable. Inspectors interviewed staff, pulled records, reviewed footage. Sunridge tried to call it isolated. Then another family came forward. Then another. Then the story got bigger than Patricia could control. Denise was arrested. 2 other staff members were terminated and charged. Patricia was charged for negligence and cover-up because she knew and did nothing. Sunridge lost its license. And my mom? My mom spent her last months in a facility where staff spoke gently and held her hand like she mattered. She didn't flinch at footsteps in the hallway anymore. She slept, and when she had good days, she'd smile at me and say, "You're my good boy," like she'd never forgotten. Before she passed, I sat beside her bed and promised her something I wish I'd promised earlier. I won't ever let anyone hurt you again. If you have someone you love and care, listen to your gut. Don't let polished offices and 5-star reviews silence your instincts. Because sometimes, the truth isn't what they tell you. It's what they never expected you to see.